If you're hearing this broadcast, you've slipped into the frequency. Welcome to Unit 3AM. Lucky you. Or not. Hard to tell these days. Tonight's transmission is stitched together from people who took one wrong turn and apparently refused to turn back. Brilliant decisions all around. Parallel malls, roads that don't exist, buses that don't go where they should, kids who never made it into this reality, but somehow still punch in for work anyway. Before we start, subscribe. Do something productive for once. It'll help me find you again when the timeline inevitably eats itself. All right, let's open the door. Hope it's not another mall. Our first caller learned the hard way that malls have extra rooms. You know, for when reality wants to mess with you and offer bad pizza.
This happened to me back in the mid-90s, when I was still a kid. It was a rainy Saturday, and instead of going to the big shopping mall we usually visited, my dad decided to take me to a much smaller one, near a university on the outskirts of town. We spent the morning doing the usual things, browsing stores, wasting quarters at the arcade, just killing time. Right before we were about to leave, we passed a small sit-down pizza place inside the mall. My dad asked if I wanted a slice, and of course I said yes. I was a kid. Pizza was always an automatic yes. The moment we stepped through the doorway, everything changed. The lighting inside was wrong. Not dimmer, not brighter, just off, as if someone had put a blue filter over the entire room. The temperature dropped sharply too, and the noise from the mall suddenly sounded muffled, like we were underwater. Then the people inside stopped what they were doing and stared at us. Every single one of them. Even my dad, who is normally calm, logical, and impossible to rattle, had this frozen, confused look on his face. We ordered anyway, because what else do you do in a moment like that? We sat down, and I could feel eyes on us the whole time. There was one guy sitting alone in the corner, wearing a hat and dark glasses indoors. He didn't look away for a second. The smile he gave us, I still remember it. It didn't look human. We ate fast. Neither of us wanted to stay any longer than necessary. And the second, literally the second, we stepped back into the hallway of the mall, the strange feeling disappeared. Warmth returned. The lighting looked normal again. The ambient sound came rushing back. It was like stepping out of a bubble. Years passed, and eventually I told some friends about what happened. They wanted to see the place, so we made the drive out there. We searched the mall from end to end. No pizza restaurant, no empty unit, nothing. Finally, I asked an older maintenance worker if he remembered a pizza place ever being in the mall. He looked at me like I was confused and said, "There hasn't been a restaurant like that here in decades." When I got home and told my dad what we found, he didn't even blink. He just said, "I always felt like wherever we walked into that day, it wasn't the same place we walked out of."
If everyone in the room stares at you at the same time, yeah, you're the problem. Or you're not supposed to be there. Same energy. Next call. And if you're near a mall while listening, maybe don't look directly at the exits. They get shy.
This happened a few years ago, shortly after my 30th birthday. I had dropped my wife and our baby at the mall so they could walk around while I went to meet a couple of coworkers for lunch nearby. Lunch took about an hour, nothing unusual, just a normal meal at a small Asian restaurant I'd been to many times before. When I got back in my car and headed toward the mall to pick up my family, the first thing that struck me was a strange feeling in my chest. Not fear, exactly, but a kind of pressure, like something wasn't lining up. When I reached the mall's main entrance, the one I had used earlier that morning, it was closed off. Cones, temporary fencing, no entry. I kept driving, assuming one entrance was under maintenance, but the next one was blocked too. And the next. Eventually, I was forced down a narrow road that looped behind the mall. A road I'd never noticed in all my years living here. Both sides were lined with orange barriers and construction signs. There were workers in reflective vests standing around, but something about them felt wrong. Their movements were stiff. Their faces didn't match what their bodies were doing. One of them turned his head toward me in a way no human does. Too slow, too synchronized, like he was following a script. I remember his eyes being completely blank. And then, nothing. There's a gap. A missing chunk in my memory where driving should have been. The next thing I was aware of, I was several blocks away, rolling slowly past buildings I had never seen before. Tall ones. Too tall for our town. Modern glass and metal structures that absolutely did not exist the day before. It looked like my town, but upgraded or replaced. I pulled over, convinced for a moment that I might be having a medical emergency, but I felt completely normal. No dizziness, no confusion except for the situation itself. And I've never had anything like that happen before or since. Trying to calm down, I circled back toward the mall. That's when the real shock hit. The mall wasn't the mall I knew. It had a completely new wing, an entire section that hadn't existed earlier that morning, a huge parking structure, new restaurants on the perimeter, a redesigned facade. It looked like it had undergone years of renovation in the span of an hour. All the barriers were gone. The road was open again. The strange workers had vanished. I pulled up to one of the entrances, and my wife walked out with our baby like nothing had happened. She didn't notice anything off about me. I casually asked, "Did they remodel something here recently?" She shrugged and said, "Not that I know of." But I swear, the landscape, the buildings, the mall itself, everything was different. I've lived in that area my entire life, and I visit that mall at least once a month. I also work in the construction field, so I always notice new developments. I would have known if anything that massive was underway. The only way I've ever been able to explain it, even to myself, is that I somehow slipped into something else. A different version of the place I knew. Or the same place in the middle of some kind of update I wasn't supposed to see. Even now, when I drive past that mall, I get this strange, cold feeling. Like I'm looking at something that wasn't built in my timeline.
Architecture shouldn't change overnight, but apparently it does. Sure, why not? All right, next line. Buckle up. Or don't. Honestly, at this point, fate will do whatever it wants anyway.
This happened nearly 2 decades ago, but I still remember every second of it. Back then, I was a single mom trying to juggle everything: work, my kid, my own scattered sense of time. I was always running late, and that morning was no different. I was speeding down the highway, way faster than I should have been, trying to make up for it. I was so lost in my thoughts that I almost missed my exit. At the last possible moment, without thinking, I veered across 2 lanes to reach the ramp. I shouldn't have tried it. I knew that even as I was doing it. I managed to cross the lanes, but as I entered the curve of the off-ramp, I caught a glimpse of a white van coming in from the right, heading straight toward the side of my car. And I was still going fast. Too fast to brake, too fast to steer out of it. There was a moment, a very clear one, where I understood deeply that the crash was unavoidable. There was nothing I could do. I remember letting go of the wheel. My whole body went quiet. My life didn't flash before my eyes like some dramatic montage. It was more like a sudden, overwhelming awareness of everything I hadn't done yet. Everything I still wanted to be for my child. And then, everything went blank. Not darkness, not light, just a neutral, muted nothing, like being inside a color that doesn't exist. No sound, no motion, no fear. And then, abruptly, I was back. I opened my eyes and found myself sitting perfectly straight, the car completely aligned, engine running, as if I had calmly pulled up to a red light. A red light that was about 100 meters down the exit ramp, well past the point where the collision should have happened. I had no memory of braking, no memory of correcting the car, no sense of impact or time or movement. I looked to my right, expecting the van driver to be furious, yelling, gesturing, something. But the van was just sitting there next to me, the driver relaxed, not even glancing in my direction, as if nothing unusual had occurred at all. I drove to work in silence, trying to understand what happened, feeling like I had stepped out of one moment and dropped into another entirely. It wasn't the only strange event in my life, but it was the first time I realized reality doesn't always behave the way we expect it to.
If your car teleports itself into the proper lane, just say, "Thank you," and move on. Before we keep going, subscribe while you're still you. These stories tend to rearrange people, sometimes literally. Next caller walked outside and found a silence even the birds didn't trust. When birds stop singing, something's wrong. When they look at you, run.
This happened to me in April 2025. I live in a small district town, and that afternoon I was hanging out at the local acai shop where a close friend of mine works. It felt like a normal day, nothing out of place. Around 2:20 p.m., I went home to eat something, planning to come back in about an hour. When I stepped outside again, I immediately felt that something was wrong. The street was completely empty. No people, no cars, not even birds. There was no sound at all, just silence, thick and uncomfortable. When I reached the acai shop, the door was open, but my friend wasn't there. As I walked near the town square, I noticed someone ahead of me who looked exactly like her. Same clothes, same posture. I followed, but when I passed behind the church, she was gone. That's when everything changed. The street was suddenly full of people. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. They were just watching me. For a moment, I wondered if something was wrong with me. Then an older man stepped forward from the crowd and looked straight at me. "You're not from here." I didn't stay. I turned around and went straight home. When I arrived, everything felt normal again. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. That's when I checked the time. It was 7:20 p.m. More than 5 hours had passed. To this day, I still don't know where I was during those missing hours, or who those people really were.
If an entire street stares at you at once, that's not curiosity. That's the universe checking your warranty. Next line. Roads behave until they don't, which is fantastic news for everyone with anxiety.
This happened to me and my husband a few years ago, sometime around 2021 or 2022. Back then, we were still dating. I live in a coastal city in Brazil, and one Sunday, we decided to take a short trip to a beach about an hour away. It was a quiet place, right next to a large industrial port. We spent the afternoon swimming, talking, watching the sunset. Nothing strange at all. Before leaving, we talked for a bit with a fisherman who showed us some of the fish he had caught, including a stingray. By then, the sun had already gone down, but it wasn't fully dark yet. We got on the motorcycle and started heading home, taking the same route we were sure we had used to get there. At some point, we must have taken a wrong turn. We ended up on a stretch of road that was completely empty and still under construction. No signs, no workers, nothing. Just a half-finished highway disappearing into the distance. A little further ahead, after a curve, we saw what looked like a tunnel. We figured it might connect back to the main road, so we kept going toward it. That's when we heard it. A deep engine roaring behind us, way too close. When we looked back, a massive truck was coming straight at us, speeding fast. Its lights had this strange red tint, and the cargo bed was shaking violently from the speed and weight. It blew past us, barely missing us, and went straight into the tunnel ahead. And then it was gone. We were stunned. But we assumed the tunnel had to be open. A truck that size had just gone through it. So we followed the same path. But when we reached the entrance, the tunnel was completely blocked. Huge concrete barriers sealed it shut, the kind used for major construction sites. Not even a bicycle could have passed through. And there was no way they could have been moved in seconds. No gaps, no marks, no signs of disturbance. That's when it hit us. The truck hadn't gone anywhere. It had disappeared into a tunnel that wasn't open. We turned around immediately. Strangely, just a few minutes later, we found the correct road home, almost like it had been right there the whole time. But earlier that day, on the way to the beach, that road hadn't been there. To this day, we both remember it clearly. Do you think we witnessed a glitch? Or something else entirely?
Some paths only open for one traveler, and it's never the one who wants the adventure. It's always the couple on a date. Always. This one's from childhood, because kids love wandering into places adults pretend aren't real. And by pretend, I mean avoid at all costs.
I was very young when this happened, around 6, I think. I grew up in a rural area, and one early morning I woke up before anyone else in the house. I remember deciding I wanted to go outside and play. I walked through the yard until I reached the swings my dad had built. I don't really remember why I went out there. I just remember how quiet everything was. The air was cold, and the yard felt bigger than usual. That's when I saw them. 2 children, a boy and a girl. They were sitting on the swings. I don't remember them playing, just sitting there, like they'd already been there for a while. They looked alike. Not exactly the same, but close enough that I noticed. I walked closer and asked if I could play with them. They nodded. I don't remember them talking much, only the girl asking if I had a doll we could play with together. I nodded and said I was going back into the house to get it. As I turned away, the girl spoke. Her voice was calm, very steady. Go, straight to the house, she said. You're not supposed to stay here. That was all. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded more like she was reminding me of a rule I'd already broken. I didn't question her. I went back inside, grabbed my doll, and hurried outside again. When I reached the swings, they were gone. The swings weren't moving. The yard was completely still. There were no signs anyone had been there. At the time, I remember feeling confused, maybe even a little embarrassed, like I'd imagined the whole thing. Years later, when I was much older, I learned something my family had never told me. Before I was born, my grandmother had lost a pregnancy. Twins, a boy and a girl. I don't know if what I saw that morning was real. I don't know if it was a dream or just a memory my mind changed over time. But I've never forgotten the feeling in my chest when the girl spoke. And sometimes I wonder if those children weren't there to play at all. Maybe they were there to make sure something didn't happen to me.
If someone tells you you're not supposed to be somewhere, don't argue with them, especially if they look slightly transparent. Public transportation, the quickest way to end up somewhere you didn't plan, or nowhere at all. Fun!
This happened recently, and until today, I didn't think much of it. But after watching a video about people accidentally slipping into strange versions of familiar places, something clicked, and I realized my experience wasn't normal. It was a Sunday night, the same routine as always. Every week, I visit my girlfriend in the afternoon, go to church in the evening, then catch the 9:50 p.m. bus home at the stop near her house. Except that night, things felt off. My girlfriend and her mom walked with me to the stop. We waited about 10 minutes before the bus finally came around the corner, and the moment I saw it, a cold feeling hit my stomach. The lights inside were almost completely off. Only a single dim strip near the driver was on. The rest of the bus looked swallowed in shadow. My phone was dead, so I couldn't distract myself. I sat right behind the driver and stared out the window. Even the streetlights looked wrong, dimmer than usual, like something was draining the brightness from everything around us. We rode in silence for a few minutes until the bus stopped at a small, nearly pitch-black stop surrounded by overgrown brush. That's when an elderly woman got on. She must have been close to 90. She boarded through the back door alone and slowly made her way to the seat right behind me. I felt uneasy, but tried to ignore it until I heard her speaking. She was talking to someone softly, like a private conversation. But she had gotten on by herself. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw the driver staring at her, wide-eyed, like he was hearing the same thing I was. Then she said something that froze me completely. "You're going there too. You know there's no coming back, right?" She wasn't talking to me. Or maybe she was. My body reacted before my mind did. I hit the stop button immediately. When I stood up and looked back at her, she had lowered her head, staring at the floor, like the conversation had never happened. The bus stopped right in front of the cemetery near my neighborhood. I stepped off so fast I barely touched the stairs. The bus pulled away, still dark, the old woman still inside, and the driver still looking terrified. For a long time, I convinced myself she was confused, hallucinating, or talking to something I couldn't see. But the way the bus felt, the way the lights dimmed, the way the route didn't look like the route I knew, now I'm not so sure. Whatever road that bus was heading toward, I don't think it was my stop. And somewhere out there, the driver finished that route with her. If he ever tells his side of the story, I think it might explain a lot more.
If the bus is dark when it arrives, congratulations, you were the backup passenger. Here we go again, last call of the night. Some people drift once, some drift every few years. Some treat parallel realities like a hobby.
I don't talk about this often. Every time I've tried, people either laugh or assume I'm losing it. And honestly, I can't blame them. Even I still don't fully understand what happened. But here's the version I remember. September 2014. Miguel and I had just left his grandmother's place. It was late. The desert was pitch black. He was driving fast, like he always did. I had my wireless headphones on, staring out at the empty highway. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. Out of nowhere, I felt this sudden rush of anxiety. Not panic, more like the world hesitated for a fraction of a second. Not visually, just something in the air. Then there was a massive pop, loud enough to make me jump. Miguel slowed down right away, trying to figure out what I'd reacted to. He clearly hadn't heard anything. When I took off my headphones, all I heard was static. No music, just a broken hiss. The truck's speakers were doing the same thing, cutting in and out. Every electronic device around us had glitched at the same time. I tried explaining what I felt, but Miguel didn't get it. Nothing unusual had happened on his end, and somehow that bothered me more than if he had heard it too. The air inside the truck didn't feel right, heavy, pressurized. It's hard to explain unless you felt something like it yourself. By the time we got back to his place, the electronics were done. His speakers, my headphones, completely dead. As we got out of the truck, I made an offhand comment about his sister. Miguel looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He insisted he never had a sister, ever. I pushed back. I had clear memories of her personality, the way she talked, the way she looked at me when she answered the door. I even remembered which room was hers. Miguel opened that door. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a game room, and it looked like it had always been that way. That moment is hard to describe. It felt like recognizing a place and realizing it had been rearranged while you weren't looking. I felt panic creeping in. I didn't know how to argue with reality. The next morning, Miguel told his parents what had happened. His dad brushed it off. His mom didn't. She mentioned a name, one they had chosen years before Miguel was born. Before Miguel existed, they had planned for a daughter. If she had been born, they would have given her the same name I remembered. She never made it to birth, and somehow I had memories of someone who shouldn't exist. Over the following weeks, I noticed other things. People appearing in my life who felt newly inserted, like they had always been there, except they hadn't. Others remembered events exactly as I did, minus the people who no longer existed in my version of things. That's when I stopped asking questions. My headphones never worked again. Miguel had to replace his entire sound system. That night stayed with me for years, not because I could explain it, but because I couldn't. Then, recently, while jogging near a canal, it happened again. The same slowdown, the same pressure in the air, the same sharp pop. My AirPods died instantly, just like before. Whatever happened in 2014, I don't think it stayed in 2014.
Headphones break. Speakers die. Timelines glitch. Honestly, same problem, different universe. That concludes tonight's broadcast. If anything around you feels a little misaligned, don't panic. Or panic, I'm not your therapist. If you've slipped, drifted, vanished, reappeared, or stepped somewhere not on the map, send your story in. I read every transmission that survives the journey. Use this channel, contact.unit3am@gmail.com. If it reaches me, maybe it'll reach the next broadcast. No promises. And before the frequency shifts, hit subscribe. It makes it easier to find you again, assuming you want that. This is Unit 3 AM, signing off.